In this video, I'm going to share with you one simple tool that has a huge impact on my creativity and mental health and how you can easily implement it. If you're new here, my name is Erin and I like to make videos about art, creativity, mindfulness, and just connect with the artistic and creative community. So thank you for joining me. When was the last time you did something, anything, without external stimulation, such as the TV is on, music is playing, a podcast, a YouTube video, or just anything on, like, playing in the background? I think that is becoming increasingly rare with how much stimulation and content there is out there to consume. I would say that this type of activity is almost required for fostering the type of self-connection that you need in order to create authentically. For the sake of this video, I'll refer to this as quiet time, but basically what I mean and what I'm talking about is just doing something without watching anything or listening to anything at the same time. And doing this consciously has a really big connection to creativity and mental health. One way that I think of this is like shower thoughts. Have you ever been in the shower and suddenly a light bulb goes off? The solution to a problem that's been like driving you nuts forever finally comes to you. How about when you're driving and a lot of creative ideas come to you and you scramble to do a voice note to get down all of these ideas because you're driving and you can't write them down? There's a massive subreddit that refers to this shower thoughts idea. Basically what it is, it's mind wandering or daydreaming, something that we've all heard of. And if you engage in this consciously and put intention into it, it's been shown that you'll come up with ideas that you never would have thought of if you weren't doing this, if you weren't allowing your brain to do its thing. One reason for why this works is because it reduces your stress levels. The amount of stimulation that's in our world today between like TV and social media and just outside world is manageable in small doses, but it can become really unmanageable and stressful if it's constantly being thrown at you. And after a while, it becomes too much. I think that as creatives, we all know that when we're stressed, our creativity is stifled, and eliminating things that stress you out will help foster more creativity, more freedom in your brain to think of those ideas. When you minimize stressful situations, or you at least limit the amount of stressful stimulation that's coming at you, even if it doesn't seem like listening to a podcast or watching YouTube videos for hours straight has a negative impact on your creativity or your stress levels, over time it like compounds and it makes it harder for your brain to think for itself. And while we may think we're creating at our best level in this mode, there's a lot that you might be missing out on that you wouldn't think of or come up with if you were allowing yourself to think without all of this stimulation coming at you. Your best work is created when stress is at a minimum and your mind can breathe. There are many benefits to your creativity when you let your mind wander and you sit with your own thoughts without any external stimulation. And one thing is just reducing mental clutter. And mental clutter comes in many forms, but one of the most vast and infiltrative examples is the constant consumption of stimulation that we participate in nowadays, whether it's social media, television, constantly listening to or watching something. A lot like physical clutter, like a messy desk, mental clutter fogs our vision and makes it a lot harder for us to create and develop new ideas. When you are trying to be creative, but you're also listening to or watching something, which, by the way, is not inherently bad. I'm talking about doing exercises where you don't do those things for short amounts of time, not just never doing it. But when you are listening to something while you are creating, then whatever you're listening to or watching could be taking the place of your brain trying to come up with new ideas. It's basically like standing in the way of what your brain might be able to come up with if it were just thinking freely and for itself. So even if it's just for the idea forming phase or the drafting phase, I would strongly recommend doing that part without any external influence, at least for that part. When we give ourselves this chance at eliminating outside influence, it activates something called the default mode network, which is basically a system of brain networks. It's only activated when you're at wakeful rest. So you are awake, but your brain is not occupied by anything else. This network is closely linked to self-reflection, memory consolidation, and to creative thinking. The default mode network is activated by simple tasks such as meditation, daydreaming, or mind wandering like the shower thoughts, or simply doing something like taking a walk or going outside and sitting out in the fresh air. For me personally, I find that this also happens when I'm painting or making art and I'm not listening to anything or watching anything. And just as a side note, the DMN is also activated when you're sleeping. I was afraid of the wind. Anyway, the DMN is also activated when you're sleeping. So aside from a million other reasons it's important to get enough sleep, this would be another one. And the inactivity of the DMN is closely linked to mental illness. So that's another pretty solid reason to let your mind wander and do its thing every once in a while. So now I want to talk about actionable steps you can take and real things you can implement in order to do this. And I'll address the biggest challenge that comes up for most people when they try to do something like this. So the first and most straightforward way to implement something like this is just to choose like one task in your day, whether it's doing the dishes, cleaning the house, taking the dog for a walk, painting if you're an artist, or drawing or creating, whatever you create. Choose one thing in your day to do without watching or listening to anything at the same time. The second way that you can do this is to set aside a certain amount of time in your day, like 3 hours or something, where you're not going to listen to anything or watch anything. And this can be a set time frame each day, or if you just want to try it one day and see how it goes, or if you want to make it some sort of a routine, just set aside a specific amount of time where you're not going to distract yourself. And the third kind of most hardcore way would be to set a challenge for yourself. So you'll go, one day without watching any TV, or you'll go a week without social media, or anything like that. That's a couple of days or a day or a week where you're going to basically abstain from whatever the stimulation is that you usually distract yourself with. And this third option could be kind of considered like a full-fledged purge of these types of things. Whichever option you choose or whichever way you decide to go about this, just make sure that it's something that you can sustain and that you believe will work for you and that you think that you will get the most value out of. And now I want to address the big scary elephant in the room, the fear of connecting with yourself or being alone with your own thoughts. First of all, I would say if doing something like this scares you, you need to do it. And that's even more reason to do it. If you're afraid to connect with yourself or be alone with your own thoughts, or it's not something that you have done or regularly do, then you probably need it more than you think. And you'll probably get a lot more out of it than you realize you will. And if you think it's going to be really challenging for you to get past the temptation of turning something on or listening to something or looking at social media or whatever it is that you're trying to avoid doing for this time period, then honestly, the biggest thing, the only way that you can really do it is to just start and just do it. You can do so much preparation to purge your brain of all of this stimulation, but at the end of the day, what you have to do is just dive in. And to sort of get used to this concept, I really suggest implementing meditation into your daily routine, even if it's just 5 minutes of meditation. It will have a drastically positive effect on your ability to connect with yourself and do these types of activities. And just as a side note, meditation is my number one tool, my favorite thing to do every day to help my creativity and connect with myself and be more mindful about the way that I show up in the world and in my everyday life. I could do a whole other video on meditation, but for now, we'll keep talking about mind wandering and the DMN theory. One really valuable tool to stick with something like this, or to make sure that you understand what you got out of it, is to reflect on the experience afterwards. And that can look like sitting and thinking about it. It can be writing about it, which is what I would recommend doing, meditating on it, anything where you're going to actively reflect on how this activity impacted you and what you got out of it. This type of reflection is what helps me stick with doing these types of things, and it's what helps me understand what works for me. And doing this activity has impacted me a lot personally, and it has impacted my creativity and my artistic practice a lot. I was finding that when I was painting and I was always watching something or listening to something, I was kind of struggling to come up with unique ideas. And while painting only what I see is part of what I do, because I like to paint somewhat realistic paintings, I also like to let my brain make up some of what I'm gonna do and make up creative ways to execute what I'm doing. This way I can make up part of the story and add unique elements that I might not have thought of if I didn't let my brain wander. I was almost finding that if I was distracting myself, or if I was watching something or listening to something while painting all the time, it was almost like that part of my brain that would come up with these ideas was occupied. Another way that this has impacted me personally is I kind of started to see the value in my shower thoughts. I started to notice the ideas that were coming to me when I was in the shower or driving or doing something where I didn't have anything else going on in the background. And I attribute these things that I've thought of and come up with in these moments to the default mode network. And when I started to notice these things more, I couldn't help but wonder what else I was missing out on when I was distracting my brain. So as a result, I started to implement this even more in my daily routine and in my creative practice. So the way that I implement this on a daily basis is very simple. So now, rather than turning something on at the start of a creative session, I will wait until I'm through that idea forming phase, or I'll get into the mode a little bit before I put something on. I like to hash out ideas in my head before I occupy that part of my brain with something else. So it's not like I'm never watching YouTube videos or listening to podcasts while I'm painting, but I'm just giving my brain a little bit of time to think before I busy that part of my brain with something else. I also pick things throughout the day to do just without listening to anything or watching anything. I choose one or two of those things throughout my day to do without that background stimulation. So I'll drive to the gym without listening to a podcast, or I'll clean the house without watching YouTube videos. I seriously have found that just making these little changes or taking these little moments in my day has made a really big impact on how I connect with myself and how I show up for my creative practice and just my everyday life, and how present and mindful I am. So I would love to discuss with you guys down in the comments, and have you guys discuss with each other if this is something that you think you need more of, and how you might implement this into your daily routine. If this is something that you already do, how does it impact you? I really enjoy talking about these types of subjects, so if you like these conversations, then subscribe to my channel, because this is what I like to talk about. I like to discuss art, creativity, mindfulness, and everything in between. I will catch you guys in the next one. Thank you. Bye.